Welcome to Spoiled Vision Movie Recaps. Today, we explore the 2022 crime drama, The Outfit. Spoilers ahead. Proceed with caution. The movie begins in 1956, set in Chicago, within a seemingly modest fashion store owned by an elderly British man named Leonard Burling. Mr. Leonard, originally from the United Kingdom, had previously worked at London's renowned fashion store for several years before relocating to Chicago for various reasons. In this new venture, he employed a striking woman named Mabel Seen as his assistant. The clothing from Mr. Leonard's shop had gained notoriety in Chicago, attracting several affluent families, including the powerful Boyle family, as regular clients. The Boyles were a prominent mafia group within Chicago, and they frequently frequented Mr. Leonard's shop, either to order bespoke suits or discreetly exchange correspondence through a mailbox located in the store. Mr. Leonard had intentionally provided this mailbox for customers to leave tips or messages. One fateful evening, Richie Boyle, the only son of the Boyle family, visited Mr. Leonard's shop to retrieve some letters sent by their correspondent, accompanied by Francis, a trusted associate. Despite their arrival, Mr. Leonard remained composed and focused on his work as a tailor. Among the letters, Francis stumbled upon a missive from a mafia organization known as The Outfit. Richie then requested Mr. Leonard to momentarily leave the room as they considered the contents private and confidential. Meanwhile, in the store's lobby, Mabel presented Mr. Leonard with a snowball-shaped gift sent by an acquaintance. These snowballs contained depictions of various beautiful locations worldwide, such as the Eiffel Tower, Big Ben, or Barcelona. As Mabel harbored dreams of global travel, she expressed her admiration for Mr. Leonard's choice to settle in Chicago, given his ability to establish a shop anywhere. After Richie and Francis departed, Mr. Leonard confided in Mabel, revealing that an employee from the clock shop next door had expressed interest in getting to know her. Mabel, however, declined the invitation as she already had a close connection with someone else. This prompted Mr. Leonard to speculate about her relationship with Richie, citing their flirtatious interactions during a napkin folding task. He cautioned Mabel to exercise caution, highlighting Richie's affiliation with a violent and weapon-associated mafia. Mabel acknowledged her awareness of the Boyle family's dangerous reputation, but expressed confidence in her ability to handle Richie. She also mentioned her desire for a raise to save up for global travel. Mr. Leonard, however, insisted that a raise would be contingent on improving her skills, especially in tasks as simple as properly folding a washcloth after closing time. Mabel left for home, while Mr. Leonard opted to stay in the shop to attend to remaining work late into the night. While working, he drifted into a dream about his family's past and flames. Abruptly, he was jolted awake by the sound of the shop door opening. It was Mabel and Richie, who had coincidentally met there to spend time together, confirming Mr. Leonard's suspicion of a romantic connection between them. That night, Richie shared details about his adopted brother Francis. Francis believed that a traitor in their family had leaked information to their rival mafia group, La Fontaine. Richie harbored resentment towards Francis, as his father, Roy Boyle, had placed unwavering trust in him, valuing him over his biological son. Richie never considered Francis as family, viewing him as a stranger who had once saved his father from 6 bullets. Unbeknownst to Mabel, Mr. Leonard overheard their conversation, but managed to feign sleep. Mabel, wanting to preserve Mr. Leonard's rest, led Richie out of the shop. A few days later, Richie and Francis returned to Leonard's shop for their routine mail pickup. They discovered another envelope from The Outfit containing a letter and a cassette. Afterward, they left the shop to report the matter to Mr. Roy. Later that evening, Francis and Richie urgently returned to Mr. Leonard's shop, with Richie having sustained a gunshot wound to the stomach in an attack by the La Fontaine Mafia. Francis reached out to Mr. Roy, informing him of their situation and their current refuge in Leonard's shop. Mr. Roy assured them he would come to collect them. Francis then requested Mr. Leonard's assistance in stitching up Richie's wound to halt the bleeding. Mr. Leonard initially hesitated because he had no experience stitching wounds, but he eventually proceeded due to his limited combat knowledge. Richie, writhing in pain, fell unconscious during the procedure, as Mr. Leonard sutured his wound without any anesthesia. After successfully stopping Richie's bleeding, Mr. Leonard was asked by Francis to look after Richie for a while. Mr. Leonard declined, expressing his desire to avoid involvement in the Boyle family's troubles and conflicts. Francis, however, insisted that Richie remain at Leonard's shop, as it was currently the only safe haven. Francis had to leave promptly to find a cassette player to play the contents of the tape he had in the suitcase. He explained that the tapes contained wiretapped conversations involving a suspected traitor within the Boyle family, believed to be cooperating with the FBI. The traitor had planted a bug in one of the places frequently visited by the Boyles. Initially, Francis and Richie had intended to play the tape elsewhere, but they were ambushed by members of the LaFontaine group, leading to Richie's injury. Multiple mafia groups were vying to obtain the tapes to undermine the Boyle family. Shortly after Francis left, Richie regained consciousness. Mr. Leonard revealed that he knew about the tapes and the suspected traitor from Francis. He asked Richie if he suspected anyone within their family of being the traitor. In response, Mr. Leonard suggested that the traitor might be someone close to the Boyle family, but not an actual family member. Mr. Leonard, while sitting at his cloth-selling chair, confessed that he was the one who had leaked information to their enemies. Richie initially laughed, thinking it was a jest, and Mr. Leonard joined in the laughter. Mr. Leonard then explained that he was not merely a tailor but a cutter, highlighting the distinction between the two roles. He had undergone years of training at the world-renowned fashion store called The Row and had served as an apprentice before gaining permission to open his own shop. Returning to the topic of Francis and the search for the traitor, Mr. Leonard proposed the possibility that the traitor could be Francis himself. Moments later, Francis returned to Leonard's shop. Before meeting Richie, Mr. Leonard had secretly whispered to Francis that Richie suspected him of being a traitor. Richie, influenced by Mr. Leonard's earlier words, began to question Francis about why he had been the only one hit by LaFontaine's gunfire that night while Francis remained unscathed. Francis attributed it to sheer luck and mentioned his intention to play the tape immediately, but Richie insisted on waiting for his father, who was soon to arrive. The tension escalated, resulting in a physical altercation over the tape. When they realized the suitcase was empty, they pointed their guns at each other. Richie fired a shot that missed, but Francis's shot struck Richie in the neck, killing him. Francis immediately searched for the tape Richie had supposedly hidden. Shortly thereafter, Mr. Roy and his men arrived at Mr. Leonard's shop, causing Francis to panic. He urgently asked Mr. Leonard to hide Richie's body and buy some time to clean the floor of Richie's bloodstains. By the time Mr. Roy entered the shop, the floor was spotless, and Francis concocted a story about Richie's departure with the tape from the outfit without disclosing his destination. Mr. Roy explained to Mr. Leonard that the Boyle family had received an offer from the outfit, the world's largest mafia organization, known for its extensive networks in Europe and America. The offer was for an alliance because the Boyle family was the only mafia group willing to confront LaFontaine. The outfit had assisted them by sending the FBI wiretapping tape to unveil the traitor within the Boyle family. Mr. Leonard, surprised, inquired why Mr. Roy was sharing this information, as he had never been briefed on the family's affairs before. It became evident that Mr. Roy had deduced Richie's presence in Leonard's shop since Richie had left his coat there. Mr. Roy knew that Richie wouldn't part with his coat in the winter, leading him to suspect that Mr. Leonard had something to hide. Mr. Roy, brandishing a gun, began to threaten Mr. Leonard to divulge the truth. However, before Mr. Leonard could respond, Francis entered the room, carrying Mabel with him. Mr. Leonard, fearful that Francis might harm Mabel, began to explain that Richie's actions were driven by embarrassment. Richie felt inferior because Francis had managed to shoot 4 of LaFontaine's men while he had not hit anyone. In an attempt to prove his worth to Roy, Richie decided to return to LaFontaine's territory to engage in gunfire. Mr. Leonard had refrained from sharing this earlier because Richie had forbidden him from informing Mr. Roy to spare him worry. Mr. Roy inquired why Francis had brought Mabel with him. Francis suggested that Richie had gone to Mabel's house because she was Richie's girlfriend. When Mr. Roy asked Mabel about Richie's whereabouts, she confessed that she had no knowledge of his location. However, Francis interrupted and pointed out a bloodstain on Mabel's carpet, likely from Richie. Mr. Roy, growing increasingly frustrated, resorted to coercion in an attempt to extract the truth from Mabel. Witnessing this, Mr. Leonard intervened, attempting to calm Mr. Roy. It was then revealed that Mr. Leonard had previously had a wife and daughter, both of whom had perished in a fire. As a result, he had come to regard Mabel as his own daughter. Soon after, the phone rang, and Mr. Leonard answered. Richie was on the line, claiming to be hiding from La Fontaine and requesting pickup at street number 31. Mr. Roy and his men rushed to retrieve Richie, while Francis chose to stay behind, ensuring Mr. Leonard and Mabel's safety, should Richie's information prove false. Subsequently, Mr. Leonard explained that he had intentionally provided the address to set up an attack by the La Fontaine group on Mr. Roy and his men. He also disclosed that Mabel was the traitor they had been seeking all along. After forming a special relationship with Richie, Mabel had numerous opportunities to gather information about the Boyle family and leak it to La Fontaine in exchange for money. Aware that Francis would eventually discover her betrayal, Mabel had sought assistance from the FBI to wiretap and arrest the entire Boyle family, thus ensuring her safety, as the FBI would eliminate the Boyles. Mr. Leonard had been privy to Mabel's plans and had allowed them to unfold, as Mabel aimed to amass wealth for her world travels. He had also concealed the tapes to protect Mabel. Soon after, La Fontaine and his men arrived at Leonard's shop to exchange money for the tape. Before the transaction, Francis requested that Mr. Leonard and Mabel employ a specific code. Once La Fontaine had handed over the money, Francis intended to exit the back room and eliminate La Fontaine. After retrieving the tape, La Fontaine remunerated Mabel as agreed upon. Regrettably, Mabel and Mr. Leonard double-crossed Francis, revealing his location to La Fontaine, resulting in Francis being fatally shot multiple times by La Fontaine's men. After La Fontaine and his men departed, Mr. Leonard confided in Mabel. He admitted to orchestrating the tape delivery to the Boyle family via the outfit to sow discord between the Boyles and that the cassette given to La Fontaine earlier was a counterfeit. He had replaced it with his own voice recording. The genuine tape remained in his possession, purposely kept for Mabel to hand over to the FBI. This act was intended to eliminate the mafia groups associated with both the Boyle family and La Fontaine. Mr. Leonard encouraged Mabel to use the money she had just acquired to travel the world. He then proceeded to pack his belongings and set fire to his entire shop to obliterate any evidence. Unexpectedly, Francis, who had survived, rose and fired a shot at Mr. Leonard. Fortunately, the shot missed and only injured Mr. Leonard's arm. Subsequently, Mr. Leonard revealed his true identity to Francis. He had previously been involved in nefarious activities, much like Francis, but after departing from his boss and relocating to London, his family had been targeted and killed in a fire set by his boss's men. This traumatic event had prompted his move to Chicago in a quest to start anew and become a better person. The film concluded with a scene showing Mr. Leonard leaving his shop in Chicago, embarking on a journey toward a brighter future. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notification for more movie recaps.